1. The whispers beneath the floorboards. Emma had always been fond of old houses, with their creaky floorboards and vintage charm. When she bought the Victorian house on the outskirts of town, she was excited to restore it and make it her own. The place had been abandoned for years, and though the realtor had warned her about the strange occurrences in the neighborhood, Emma dismissed them as rumors. The first few nights in the house were peaceful, but on the 5th night, something changed. As she lay in bed, she started hearing faint whispers from beneath the floorboards. At first, it was so soft she thought it was just the house settling. But as the days passed, the whispers grew louder, almost like voices. One night, Emma was jolted awake by a sudden, distinct whisper right beside her ear. "Help us." Terrified, she tried to locate the source. The sound seemed to be coming from under the floorboards in the corner of the room. She got a crowbar and pried up the boards, revealing a small, dirt-filled crawl space. The whispers became frantic, now pleading, desperate. Curiosity overcame fear, and she crawled into the space. It was dark, the air thick with the smell of rot. As her eyes adjusted, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Old, tattered clothing, broken furniture, and bodies. Dozens of them, some mummified, others fresh face down, limbs twisted in unnatural angles. In the far corner, there was a note. Emma picked it up, trembling. It read, "They come every night. Don't let them hear you. Don't let them know you're here." Suddenly, the walls around her seemed to close in. The whispers turned into screams. Something began moving in the darkness, something large and heavy. Emma tried to crawl back to the hole, but the air turned ice cold, and a hand reached out of the shadows, grabbing her ankle. She screamed, but the hand yanked her down into the darkness. Her body was found a week later, but her eyes had been gouged out, and her mouth was twisted into a silent scream. 2. The man in the yellow coat. Greg had been working the night shift at the convenience store for over a month. The store was located in a small town on the edge of nowhere, with few customers passing through after dark. One stormy night, as he wiped down the counter, the bell above the door jingled, signaling the entrance of a customer. It was a man, tall, thin, and wearing an old-fashioned yellow coat. Greg looked up, smiling politely. "Can I help you with something?" The man didn't reply. Instead, he walked past the counter slowly, his eyes fixed on the back of the store, where the shelves of canned goods were lined up. His movements were stiff, unnatural. Greg thought it was odd, but he didn't think too much of it at the time. The man walked to the back of the store, then paused. He turned around and slowly walked back to the counter, still not saying a word. Greg felt an unsettling chill run down his spine. There was something deeply wrong about the man's eyes. They were glazed, empty, like he was staring into nothingness. "Are you okay?" Greg asked, trying to sound casual. The man stared at him, and for a moment Greg could have sworn he saw a faint smile tug at the corners of his lips. Then, without a word, the man turned and walked out the door. Later that night, as Greg locked up the store, he realized that the door had been left unlocked. He checked the security footage. The man had never come back out. There was no trace of him, no sound of the door jingling, no footsteps, nothing. It was as if he had never existed. Greg returned to his apartment, shaken. That night, he dreamt of the man in the yellow coat, standing at the foot of his bed, grinning. The man reached out with cold hands, placing them on Greg's chest. As he did, Greg felt something heavy, something dark and ancient pressing down on him, crushing the air out of his lungs. When Greg woke up, he was alone, but his chest was bruised, as if someone had been pressing on it for hours. His phone buzzed with a news alert: local man found dead at convenience store. Cause of death unknown. 3. The endless road. It was supposed to be a short drive. Rachel and her boyfriend Jason had decided to take a weekend trip to a remote cabin in the mountains. The weather was perfect, the drive was smooth, and the weekend was looking to be everything they had hoped for. But that changed when they took a wrong turn. They had been driving down a winding road for hours, deep into the mountains. The further they went, the more desolate it became. No signs of life, no other cars, just trees and the occasional dilapidated building. As the sun began to set, they realized they hadn't seen a road sign or turnoff in hours. The GPS had no signal, and the only thing they had was the winding road ahead of them. They kept driving, but something felt off. Jason tried to keep the mood light, but Rachel noticed how tense he was becoming. Maybe we should turn around, she suggested, but Jason insisted they were fine. Then the car sputtered and the engine died. Panic set in. They were miles from the nearest town, and there was no cell signal. The darkness around them was absolute. Rachel got out of the car and immediately felt a strange sense of unease. The silence was suffocating. No wind, no birds, nothing. Just the oppressive stillness of the woods. Jason tried to start the car, but it wouldn't budge. Suddenly, Rachel saw something moving in the distance, a figure, tall and shadowy, standing in the middle of the road. She called out to Jason, but when he turned, the figure vanished. A few seconds later, they both heard it, a soft, distorted voice calling from the trees, "Come closer." Rachel froze. She had seen something in the woods, something unnatural. Suddenly, the road stretched out before them, longer and darker than it should have been. They turned around and saw the same stretch of road behind them, an endless loop that never seemed to end. No matter which way they drove, the same figure appeared in the distance. Each time it grew closer. By dawn, Rachel and Jason had disappeared. The road was empty again, as if they had never been there at all. 4. The Dollmaker's Curse. In the late 1800s, a man known as the Dollmaker was infamous for creating lifelike dolls. His creations were said to be so realistic that they could fool even the most discerning eye. But the Dollmaker wasn't simply an artisan, he had dark secrets. One evening, a young woman named Clara visited the Dollmaker's shop, intrigued by the rumors surrounding his work. She was mesmerized by the dolls, perfectly crafted, with glassy eyes that seemed to follow her every movement. The Dollmaker offered her a deal if she could sit still for 1 hour. He would give her a special gift, a doll more beautiful than any she had ever seen. Clara agreed, thinking it would be an easy task. But as the minutes ticked by, she began to feel strange. Her body grew stiff, her vision blurred, and her heartbeat slowed. By the time the hour was up, Clara found herself unable to move, her limbs frozen, her thoughts trapped within her body. The Dollmaker smiled at her, then whispered, "You're the perfect model." Clara's body was turned into one of his lifelike creations, her soul trapped inside the doll. But her story didn't end there. Decades later, a young girl named Lucy bought one of the Dollmaker's dolls, Clara. As soon as Lucy touched the doll, the eyes flickered and a whisper echoed in her mind, "Help me." Lucy didn't know it, but the curse had passed on. As long as the doll was kept in the house, Clara's soul would remain, forever searching for release. But as the years passed, Lucy began to feel her own body grow stiff, her movements slower. And every time she looked at Clara, the doll seemed a little more alive. 5. The Mirror Man. Rebecca had always been fascinated by mirrors. She had a collection of antique ones, some centuries old, each one with a story behind it. But the newest edition was different. It was a large, ornate mirror she found at a flea market, its silver frame intricate, almost sinister. The shopkeeper had warned her that it came from a dark place, but she was too intrigued to heed the warning. After hanging the mirror in her living room, strange things began happening. It started with her reflection. At night, when she would pass by the mirror, it would seem as if her reflection didn't move quite as she did. It would lag behind, almost as though it was trying to catch up. But the worst came when she saw him. One evening, as she stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair, she noticed a figure standing just behind her reflection. It was a tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes, staring at her with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine. She spun around, but the room was empty. When she looked back into the mirror, the man was gone. But now, her reflection was smiling. From that night on. 4. Oh Minnie.